Jim, if you're going to experience more freedom in your life, then you are going to have to break cycles, whether it be generational or self-inflicted. And when I say cycles, I mean like the procrastination that you've been doing, being in toxic relationships, unhealthy eating habits, lack, or being in poverty. Those are some of the cycles that we've caught ourselves being in, whether it be from our family members or passed down through our family, or whether it be things that we've done to get ourselves in these cycles, right? And so breaking cycles requires obedience. It's going to take action on your part to break that generational cycle, no matter how the cycle came into your life. Okay. And that takes me to today's scripture, which is from Genesis 12, verses 1 through 5. And in Genesis, we all know the story of where God spoke to Abram and told him to go out of your country, from your family and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. But so many times we neglect to go back to the previous scripture where Abram's father, Terah, right? He took his son and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out to them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. Listen, Abram's father, Terah, was supposed to go to the land of Canaan, but instead of going to Canaan, he settled in the land of Haran. And a lot of our parents have settled in places that God did not tell them to settle in. And therefore, God has called you to be the cycle breaker in your family. Oh my gosh. God has called us to be cycle breakers in our family because our parents failed to go to the place where God showed them to go. And so now we're being called out from among our family members. We're being called out, from our parents' house. And I truly believe that the Lord spoke to Abram so that he wouldn't be caught in the same cycle that his father found himself in, settling in a land that he wasn't supposed to settle in. And Abram was 75 years old when he left. So God was like, listen, he getting up in age and he not going to go anywhere unless I tell him to. And so God was like, I want him out of there before it is, too late. And so Terah, he never completed the journey to Canaan, and he eventually died in Haran. And so today, in order for us to break the cycles in our lives, we are going to have to be obedient, right? And let's just give an example. And let's just say a real life example is you were born into a family of poverty and addiction. Your parents settled, in poverty, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, we all have family that are stuck in their ways and they settled in a place. And so God has been speaking to you to get the education, right? Because our parents, our grandparents, aunt and uncles, they felt like they didn't have a way out. They didn't have the opportunities. They lacked education. They didn't have whatever it is that they needed for them to progress forward. So now God has been speaking to you saying, I'm ready for you to leave the nest. I need you to leave this place before you become stuck in the same cycle that they are in. So he tells you to go get the education. He tells you to, do the things, start the business. And so now through your obedience, you step out in faith to go do the things that he is telling you to do, which in turns creates opportunities for your family members, creating blessings. Because that's what Abraham did when he left to go seek out the land of Canaan. His obedience opened the door for us to receive the blessings. Because of his obedience, we are being blessed because of what he did. And God is calling you to do some things right now that is going to break off some chains, break off the cycles in your family lineage along that bloodline that is going to bless generations to come. But you're not going to see it if you don't obey, right? And so we begin to step out in the thing and do the thing that God is asking us to do. And because of our obedience, we begin to break off those toxic things that have been in our lives, and we begin to experience the true blessings of God, on our lives. And so again, this is why I believe the Lord was speaking to Abram to say, get up out of here. Because if you don't, you're going to die in this land just like your father did. And you're not going to see the promise that I have for you. God has a promise for you. And the only way that you would get to see the promised land is if you step out into obedience. And so, with all of that being said, there are three things that I want you to get from today's scripture. And I came from Genesis 12, 1 through 5, as well as Genesis 11, 31 through 32. Because I think it's so important when it comes to seeking out this freedom that we really desire. We're going to have to obey the word of the Lord. And in order for us to be cycle breakers, it's going to take obedience on our parts. And so the three things that I want you to get from today's scripture is that don't settle for less than your purpose, right? Terah settled in Haran, which was short of reaching the promise, which was the land of Canaan. So don't settle with where you are, because God has a promise for you and you will see it if you obey. And so many times we get comfortable and we get stagnant because it's easier to be where we are instead of moving on the promises that God has spoken to us, right? So that's number one. Don't settle for less than your purpose. Point number two that I want to make is step out in faith, even without full clarity. Abram didn't have all the pieces. He just had a promise and he heard from the Lord, right? So if you have heard from the Lord, you are not going to get all the pieces at one time because the Lord speaks in part. And so you will find out what the pieces are as you continue to move in obedience to where God is leading you to go. So you're not going to have all the pieces. You're not going to have all the clarity, but step out in faith, trusting that what God has spoken to you, he's going to lead you to where you need to be. He's not going to lead you in a place of harm. He's not going to lead you in a place that's going to be detrimental to where he's taking you. But you have to trust that the voice that is guiding you is leading you to directly to where he is calling you. And that's where we get to break the cycle as we step out in faith, not having all the messages, all the things, not having all the steps, but knowing that this is the step that I need to take now. And what is the step that you need to take now in order for you to really see the promise and get to your promised land, right? And God is calling you to leave familiar surroundings and leaving familiar relationships. Because if you stay there, then you're going to settle there. And if you settle there, you're never going to get to where you are meant to be. Number three, your actions affect future generations. Your actions, let me say that again. Your actions affect future generations. Abram, because he had not been named Abraham yet, but Abram's obedience is causing us to receive the blessings. And so when you decide to obey, when you decide that, hey, enough is enough, I'm ready to break this cycle in my life, then we get to not only create it for us, but we get to create it for future generations on down our line. And we get to begin to disrupt. We begin to disrupt what has been in our bloodline for years and for generations. And so we are holding up future generations when we don't fulfill or walk out the things that God is asking us to do. When we don't begin to take the steps to break the cycle, to become better, and to open the door for blessings that are on our lives and the lives of our children, our children's children, our children's children's children, the whole line, right? And it's just so amazing how God always gave the genealogy of a person before, getting into the meat of who that person is and what happened, right? And it's so important for us to know our genealogy to see where the patterns are so that we can begin to break the pattern. What did my great grandmother do? What did my great uncle do? All the things, because that shows you where you are and where the enemy really wants to keep you, because if he can keep you in that cycle, then he has you, and he's won the battle to keep you from getting to your destination, to get to the destiny that God is calling you to. So when you don't break the cycle, you're holding up future generations. When you don't break the cycle, you're affecting the future generations to come. And so your actions dictate what will happen. And so what has been your Haran? Where have you settled and God is calling you to move? Because now is the time to get to moving. Now is the time to get to moving. We don't have time to play around. We don't have time to continue to let these cycles affect us and keep us in a repeated thing over and over every day. We don't have time for that. We got work to do. God has called us to do a work, and God is calling us to get to the promised land. The promise can only be obtained by your actions and by being obedient. And so I hope this message has blessed you today. My name is D. Latoya Matthews, and I am your Freedom Ambassador. And I am on a mission to propel women into true freedom, shifting from shame and regret, insecurities, all the things into purpose and destiny. And so it is so important for us to really take heed and listen to the word of what God is speaking. And so I hope this spoke to you today. And if it did, please share it out with someone who needs to hear it, because we're on a mission of breaking cycles and bringing generational healing to our families. Until next time, be safe and live a good life. So until next time, be free, live free, and stay free. God bless.